This video will discuss what I hope you have read in Othello in order to finish on schedule. And next week is the last formal week of classes. You have time the week after next to finish that test, but you really need to start it now, not wait till the last minute. I want to make something else clear before I talk about the specifics of the play. I have said that it's okay for you to use side-by-side modern English translations because a lot of you will do that whether I give permission or not. What it's not okay to do is go online and use other people's almost always anonymous material and insert it in any kind of test, in any kind of assignment for my class that's not a research paper. And for the research paper, there are databases that I expect you to stay in, and you will get a 0 for plagiarism if you go outside the databases that I talk about on the assignment sheet. So I'll give you an example of an issue that just came up with the first question on the poetry test. I've looked at all of those, and quite a few people discuss the fair young man whom the speaker is addressing. Well, I said, actually, I remember saying this to the classes with whom I met face to face and saying it on videos, that's not a good assumption to make, that the audience is not that specific, that some people have assumed it is that specific because they have taken an inscription that Shakespeare used where he describes his patron, the person who enabled him to publish sonnets in a volume while the theaters were closed in the mid-1590s in London. He spoke very passionately about his gratitude for that source of funds. Well, that was commonplace, and it doesn't mean anything about a relationship. Yet there are people who assume that it does, that it must mean something about relationships. And a lot of you clearly found that online because it directly contradicts what I told you in class. I don't want to limit the arguments that you make for yourself about literature, but I need to make it really clear that when you're using other people's arguments and putting your name on it, that is an act of plagiarism. And if I catch you at it, there will be no time to fix the problem this time. So don't go online and use lit charts or Schmoop or something else to get your information about Othello. I am not going to appreciate that. It's not a research project in any respect unless you decide to do that for your research paper, and then you need to stay within the databases that I discussed on the handout for the research paper. Any other source that you use to generate ideas, to generate any information that you wouldn't have known without looking at the source, is plagiarism. And that means that if you do it, you risk losing everything because there's no time to fix issues of plagiarism at the end of a semester. So I really need to caution you, don't do that. It's inappropriate. It's something that you may have gotten away with in the past, but I'd be really careful if I were you, because you could end up failing a class that you thought you were going to pass, because you did something dumb at the end of the semester when there's no time to fix it. I'm not going to give you an incomplete if you plagiarize. You're going to get a 0, and the consequences to the gradebook will be substantial. All right, Othello. I talked about Act 1. These are some of the issues, and I'll try to be brief here, that I want you to keep tracking. You should be finished with Act 3 this week. By the end of the week, I want you to be finished with Act 3. Then next week, it'll be easy to finish the play. So here are some key issues that I want you looking at. Iago talks about motives for his acting out against Othello and others. The first one that he offers in Act 1 is his jealousy over Michael Cassio for having gotten a promotion that he thought he deserved. If you trust Iago, which I think would be a bad decision, then you have to ignore what he says at the end of Act 1 and at the beginning of Act 2 about other motives. And he's talking to the audience. These are soliloquies, so he's lying to the audience. One other motive is that he fears Othello is sleeping with his wife. Another is that he thinks Michael Cassio is sleeping with his wife. You should mark the places where he says, because some of them seem like they're brief lines, but he's very clear that he wants us to hear him say that. That doesn't mean that he believes it. We have no idea what's going on inside of his head. I think he watches people and he imitates the humanity of their behavior, but he doesn't actually have it himself. So when he imitates, he does a really good job, but he's wearing a mask that he doesn't take off even when he's addressing the audience. I don't know that it's any safer to assume that he's jealous of Othello for sleeping with his wife or Michael Cassio for sleeping with his wife. Or that he likes Desdemona himself, which is another thing that he says. He throws out a lot of reasons through the course of the play. And we haven't gotten to any of them that I find the least bit tempting. They tend to contradict each other. And if you really wanted only to get if you wanted to get Michael Cassio fired, well, he accomplishes that early in Act 2. That's one of the things that he gets Rodrigo to do. It's all very carefully orchestrated. He has Rodrigo come with him from Venice to Cyprus. And Rodrigo's complaining, you've broken my bank account, and I basically given you all my trust and all my time, and I'm not, and now you're telling me, because they have a private conversation, and Iago says, Michael Cassio's in love with Desdemona. So Rodrigo's like, well, what, am I third in line here? I don't have a chance. And Iago says, patience, patience. You have a great chance. You got to keep giving me money, of course, but I'll tell you how to bring it off. Pick a fight with Michael Cassio, a professional soldier, tonight. That's a great idea. You start a fight with him, and we'll see where that goes. Maybe you can accomplish something with that. And Rodrigo's like, yep, boss, okay. And he does. Meanwhile, Cassio and Iago have been given the governance of the island because Othello is still in a position where, I mean, they left Venice in such a hurry that he hasn't consummated the relationship with Desdemona yet. And he doesn't that night, because even though he's left Iago and Cassio to do crowd control and do the governance, Iago makes a mess of that by getting Cassio to take another cup of wine. Cassio had one cup already. Cassio's got a drinking issue, which he's really open with Iago. Iago says, this won't hurt anything. To have one more cup, it's no big deal. The nobility of this place, they expect it. We just want a war without fighting, without firing a single shot. You should drink with us. Come on, it's no big deal. So Cassio drinks and has the problems he predicted that would come up. Rodrigo comes up and starts a fight with him, and they run off into the night. Iago finds that works out perfectly, because when they come running back, Iago lets Rodrigo run off. Later will claim that he chased Rodrigo, but Rodrigo outran him. Well, of course Rodrigo outran him. He wasn't really chasing him. He's the one who set up the whole situation. Montano, who is a nobleman of the island, is standing with Iago and tries to break up the fight that Cassio comes back on stage, seeming to have with Rodrigo. Montano says, stop fighting. And Cassio stabs him. Before the stabbing, Iago makes an interesting comment, because Montano says, how often is Cassio drunk? Oh, every night. We know that's not true. And in fact, after he says that to Montano, while Montano is bleeding and unable to speak for himself, Iago takes that back when Othello asks what's going on. He says, I've never seen him like this before. his story's so complex that it's hard to keep it straight for all the people in the audience, but fortunately for him, Montano's bleeding to death, so he can't speak for himself. And Iago's managed to badmouth Michael Cassio to Montano, who, after Othello stitches him up, will probably say, your guy Iago told me that Cassio's got a drinking problem. Not hearing the bit where Iago said, he doesn't have a drinking problem. He's never liked us. I don't know what's into him tonight. Because he's got to sound like he's Cassio's friend to Othello, or when he starts to insinuate things about Cassio a little bit later, it won't be as credible. I mean, he's all about being credible, pulling the emotional levers that other people have that he doesn't have, but that he's great at understanding. So the other piece that is put in place is that Cassio wants his job back. Othello fires him on the spot for carousing in the middle of the night, waking up half the people on the island. And Iago says, I got a great idea. Hang around Desdemona. She's the general's general. She runs, he'll listen to her when he won't listen to anybody else. So you should go talk to her, and she won't give it a rest, because she likes you, and not in any sexual way. He doesn't say that to Cassio. Certainly he's going to suggest it to Othello, but that's later. To Cassio, he says, go talk to Desdemona, she'll get your job back. So he does. And we see him the next morning speaking with Emilia and Desdemona, and Desdemona says, I'll never let him rest. I'm going to be chattering about Cassio, great guy, give him his job back. Which is perfect from Iago's point of view, because when he and Othello approach the little knot of people, Emilia, Iago, and Desdemona, Cassio is ashamed of his behavior the night before, so he leaves. And Iago immediately capitalizes on that by saying, I like not that. And Othello's, what do you mean? Was that Cassio? And Iago, instead of coming out with some full story, makes Othello force it from him as if it's the most horrible thing in the world to say, and he doesn't believe it. It's not a very good story, but it is one that he's torn, he says, because he thinks Othello needs to hear it. What he's able to do, and I want you to watch and track this carefully, make notes for yourself, of places where he's able to turn Othello against himself, make Othello seem an outsider. He's racially an outsider. He is converted to Christianity, but he wasn't born into a Christian culture. So he's an outsider on the basis of his race, on the basis of the religion that he had before he converted, and on the basis of just having traveled all over the world, but in the business of being a soldier. So he doesn't fit in with Venetians as well, and has significant self-doubt. But what he says when Iago finally says, I don't want to say anything bad about Cassio, maybe I read too much stuff into other people's behavior, and I don't want to get my friend into trouble. The more he makes Othello think Othello has to drag it out of Iago, the more credible Iago becomes, because it sounds like he doesn't want to say anything bad about Cassio. In fact, it's exactly the message that he wants to drill in, and in the process alienate and estrange Othello from himself. If he can do that, then it'll be easy to create a separation between Othello and Desdemona. Othello's already in the weird position where when he's with Desdemona, he seems full of joy. But he says when she's not around that chaos has come again. So he's defining a lot about the quality of his life in terms of the presence of his wife. And Iago knows how to play on that. It's to use the elements that make Othello view himself as an outsider, and the elements that make him such a good soldier. He's got to be decisive, or he will freeze up on the battlefield. So he says when Iago finally outs with, well, I may be reading too much into it, but is Desdemona talking about Cassio a lot? Well, of course she is, because now Iago put his wife up to putting Desdemona up to talking nonstop about giving Cassio back his job, which is perfect, because now he can tell Othello, well, if she's talking about Cassio, maybe something's going on. I don't know. I don't want to say anything against my friend. Othello says, don't worry. You haven't upset me at all. I'm the kind of person who's decisive, and I put an end to doubt beyond anything. If I have a reason to doubt, then I get to the source of things, and then I put doubt to the side. Either I get rid of my wife because she's cheating, or I get rid of the doubt because she's not. The problem is, and I've mentioned this before, but it's critically important, that's a false equivalence, which Iago pretends is not a false equivalence. You can catch somebody if they're cheating on you and you're able to see them in the act. It's conceivable that you can catch somebody cheating, but you can't catch somebody being faithful to you. That's not something that you see. That's not evidence. That's something that you have to know in your heart, that you basically use in place of looking for signs of infidelity. If you're looking for signs of infidelity, you already killed faith in your relationship. You did it yourself. And Iago's already leveraged Othello to the point where he's at war with himself over the question of uncertainty. He wants to be certain that Desdemona is or is not cheating, and he believes that he can be. The problem is that the terms are different. If she is not cheating, you can't prove it. You have to take her on faith. If she is cheating, it's possible that he could catch her in the act. But his looking for signs of cheating is going to hurt the relationship and make it harder for him to take her on faith. But they're not the same. You can't prove that somebody's being faithful to you. And that is a key kind of fallacy that Iago's able to exploit. So he gets Othello upset, and at the same time Othello says, I'll put an end to this. Othello says he has a headache. Desdemona tries to hand him a handkerchief that he gave her when they were first going out. He pushes the handkerchief away, and it falls to the floor, where Emilia, who's always by Desdemona's side, picks it up and says, my husband Iago has asked me to steal this like loads of times. He really wants this hanky. I don't know why. But she obviously doesn't want it. They just let it drop to the floor. Othello pushed it away. I'll pick it up and give it to Iago. Nothing bad could come from that. Later, Othello's going to demand ocular proof as he gets deeper into this kind of self-alienation. He needs to see. What Iago understands is that he actually can't bear the mental image that he already has of his wife cheating on him, and it would drive him mad if he saw it through a window. So that's exactly what Iago says. What, would you have me bring you to the window and you, the supervisor, grossly gape on? Would you like to catch him in the act? Huh? Well, I can arrange. No. Othello doesn't want to do that, actually. But Iago says, I have other proofs. And that's where he introduces the idea of the handkerchief. If you see Michael Cassio with the handkerchief, you'll know that Desdemona has given it to him. Well, that's not true. Emilia gave the handkerchief. Look at the chain of custody. It goes from Emilia to Iago, and Iago gives it to Michael Cassio. Cassio gives it to his mistress, Bianca, and she wants to take the stitching out so it can not look like it came from a different woman. But Othello sees that Cassio has that handkerchief, And that's one of the things that enables Iago to make a more compelling case. The case becomes very compelling in Othello's head in Act 3. And you have to trace all of the ways in which his sense of his difference from everybody else, his sense of a doubt that he can't put to rest, is undoing him. Here's the question, and I don't want this video to take much longer. I want you to ask yourself whether Shakespeare is asking you in the audience, by having a character who's lying to you, what you would do to resist. And if you say, well, nobody could do that to me, I'm too smart. And Iago would be able to pull on emotional strings that you have that he doesn't have, but he understands them very well. And if you're quick to say that you're resistant to that kind of person, I would say that you're probably the least safe kind of person to be around him. He would find you an easy mark. The people who would do the best are the ones who actually understand that life has a lot of uncertainty to it, and uncertainty doesn't mean something horrible. In fact, literary interpretation demands an acceptance of uncertainty, despite what lots of teachers have told you, because they are trying to get you ready for standardized testing. Literature is really about coping with the fact that life is not, it doesn't come in clear compartments. It's not always obvious what the truth is. And the people who cope best with that are the ones who accept on some level that there is uncertainty. That's what John Donne's his holy sonnets are about. Why I ask you to look for the paradox of the last couple of lines of Holy Sonnet 10, where Donne is trying to, the speaker of the poem is trying to convince death that death's going to be easy to overcome. But the speaker is actually in doubt and has a kind of contradictory message. On one level, death's easy to overcome. On another level, death's not easy to overcome, and overcoming death demands a paradox. Death gets the death penalty, but death's already been told that death's nothing to be afraid of. So if death gets the death penalty in order to put death to rest, that's no big deal. But it's an acknowledgement of doubt. Literature is an acknowledgement of doubt. It is something that is, I would say, wired into almost all of the poetry that we've looked at this semester. Robert Frost's stuff, Shakespeare's stuff, John Donne's stuff. The poetry, Young, Goodman, Brown is certainly about doubt. Othello's about doubt. And the people who don't cope well with doubt are the ones who end up dead in Act 5 of Othello. You ask yourself, what would you do if you didn't know whether somebody were playing you the way Iago seems to be playing characters? That's what I want you to trace through Act 3, and then I think you'll enjoy I don't mean enjoy in the sense that you're like rooting for Iago. He doesn't do most of the killings with his own hand. He gets others to kill each other. And I think you'll find that the ending is actually horrifying, but it is good drama because of the way it is worked up to. And there's a reference on the test, the last thing I'll say, to an old movie called Indecent Proposal. It's this rich guy who sees a young, newly married couple, and he is way older than they are. He covets the woman and says, I'll give you $1 million if you sleep with me for one night. They need the money, so they take the offer. It's the indecent proposal. And he gets her for a night, but it really almost wrecks their relationship because, it's like, that's something that Amelia and Desdemona discuss in Act 4, and that's why I put the movie reference in the test. If you want to Google it, you can read up about the movie. Don't read up about Othello. I don't want you doing that, but you can look at what you can see online about the movie, because I don't want to create a reference that is outside of Othello that you don't understand. Okay, that's it for now. If you have questions, send me an email and I will answer as quickly as possible. Thanks.